Hilda Miles' heart pounded as she clawed at the armrest, desperate to hang on. Flashes of her family, her mother's face, and that terrifying day filled her mind. But one glance out the window snapped her back to a grim reality. The ground was rushing up to meet her as the plane plummeted from the sky. In her final moments, she took a shaky breath, knowing this was the end. What happened to Hilda and other seemingly lucky people who met an unlucky end? Discover their stories on today's episode of The Infographic Show. Insanely lucky people who ended up dead. Number 10. Hilda Mile. On November 12, 2001, American Airlines Flight 587 took off from JFK Airport, bound for the Dominican Republic. It was supposed to be a smooth, routine flight, but after just 10 minutes in the air, the Airbus A300 came crashing down, killing all 251 passengers, 9 crew members, and 5 people on the ground. Given its proximity to the 9/11 attacks, many assumed this was another act of terrorism. However, investigators later discovered that the crash wasn't due to terrorism, but pilot error. The overuse of the rudder controls in response to turbulence from a nearby plane had caused the tail to break off. But if terrorism wasn't the case, what was the link to 9/11? A passenger called Hilda Yolanda Mile. She had been working in the restaurant on the ground floor of the North Tower when the plane struck. When the Twin Towers collapsed, only 20 people survived, and among them was male. Now, on her way to join her family on vacation, she lost her life in this tragic unrelated disaster. Yet, Hilda Mile wasn't the only one to survive a brush with death, only to later fall victim to another disaster. Number 10. Bud and Phyllis Ridings. In 2007, a father and daughter duo made a lucky escape when they were forced to make an emergency crash landing near Magnolia, Texas. 66-year-old LG Warren, known as Bud, and his daughter, Phyllis Jean Ridings, were brought abruptly back down to Earth by an in-flight engine fire. The aircraft itself was actually made by Bud using an engine from the Chevrolet, as both he and his daughters were members of the Experimental Aircraft Association. When a worn fuel line caused the plane to catch alight, Bud and Phyllis were able to land in a nearby hayfield, leaping out of the homemade plane moments before the cockpit was engulfed in flames. Phyllis credited her dad's flying to saving both their lives and the life of the third passenger aboard. Having escaped with their lives, you would think an incident like that would be enough to put someone off of flying for life. Well, not Bud and Phyllis. 4 years later, the duo were flying a kit-built Raven 500 plane, taking off from the Monroe County Airport in Conroe, Texas, heading toward the local air show in Temple. However, once again, the cockpit began to fill with smoke thanks to a malfunction. But this time, Bud's skills at flying wouldn't save them a second time. The aircraft crashed and exploded only a few minutes after takeoff, the wreckage coming down in a wooded area near Monroe County Airport. Both Bud Warren and Phyllis Ridings would perish in the crash. Let's stick with the aviation theme. Number 8. Meng Yuan. In yet another close brush with death thanks to a plane crash, in 2013, a 16-year-old girl by the name of Meng Yuan would miraculously survive the tragic crash of Asiana Airlines Flight 214. She was en route from her home in China to San Francisco, California, where she was due to attend summer camp. The Boeing 747 she was aboard came in too low and slow on its approach, striking a seawall and tearing off the tail section. The plane hurtled along the runway before bursting into flames. Yuan was thrown from the plane on impact. She lay prone on the grass beside the runway, alive but badly injured. As emergency vehicles rushed to the scene of the tragic crash, they unfortunately didn't see Yuan, and she was struck twice and killed. While Yuan's family initially filed a lawsuit against the city of San Francisco for wrongful death, the suit was dropped when the parties involved eventually reached a settlement. Let's round out this quadrilogy of narrowly avoided deaths by aircraft crash. Number 7. Joanna and Kurt Ganthaler. Retiree Joanna Ganthaler and her husband Kurt had been vacationing in Brazil and were scheduled to leave for Paris on the 31st of May 2009. Their flight, Air France Flight 447, ended up crashing into the Atlantic Ocean after inconsistent airspeed indications and miscommunication between the pilots led to the Airbus A330 stalling and crashing. 228 sadly lost their lives. However, among those passengers, 2 were missing. Miraculously, the Ganthalers arrived late to the airport and had missed the fateful flight. The following day, they flew back to Europe with a sense of relief, no doubt. Their intention was to drive from Germany to their home in Italy with a rented car. Around a week later, in June of 2009, the couple were on the road outside of the town of Kufstein, Austria, when their car accidentally swerved into the oncoming lane. They were hit by a truck, and while Kurt Gonthaler was able to escape with some severe but survivable injuries, the same couldn't be said for Joanna, who tragically died in the hospital. This next entry has less in common with Final Destination and gets a lot more Night of the Living Dead. Number 6. Fagilyul Mukhamadzianov. In 2011, 49-year-old Russian woman Fagilyul Mukhamadzianov collapsed in her home, suffering what doctors would determine to be a fatal heart attack. Except, it wasn't quite as fatal as they initially thought. With medical professionals announcing her death, Mukhamadzianov's family naturally began the grieving process, arranging a funeral for her. The mournful day arrived with Fagilyul brought in her coffin, and prayers read as her family prepared to bid her a final goodbye, only for the woman to wake up in her coffin. A surprise guest at her own funeral. Turned out that Mukhamadzianov wasn't dead at all. The surprise of waking up only to realize she was about to be buried terrified the life out of the woman, literally. She began screaming in fear, probably scaring everyone in attendance at the funeral too, only for her eyes to flutter closed as she suffered a second heart attack. She was quickly rushed to the hospital, however, only lived an extra 12 minutes before dying from heart failure. Surviving death once is rare, but twice? Which story has shocked you the most so far? Let us know in the comments. Number 5. Residents of Santiago, Jamiltepec. In February 2018, the residents of Santiago, Jamiltepec, Mexico felt the earth move again. A 7.2 magnitude earthquake shook the town, their third major quake in 6 months. People were still reeling from the previous disasters, which had killed many locally and over 400 across the country. Understandably, panic swept through the village. This time, however, Lady Luck appeared to show mercy. The earthquake left behind no fatalities and the town exhaled with relief, but for some the worst was yet to come. With aftershocks rippling through the area and the village plunged into darkness, a group of residents refused to take any chances. They slept outside or in their vehicles, hoping it would keep them safe. But they were wrong. As government officials arrived by military helicopter to assess the damage, the aircraft's rotors kicked up thick dust, obscuring the pilot's view. Losing control, the helicopter crashed directly into the villagers seeking shelter. 14 people were killed, and dozens more were injured. In a tragic twist, everyone on board the helicopter, including Mexico's interior minister and Oaxaca's governor, survived the crash unscathed. Number 4. David Furr. On December 13th, the University of Evansville's basketball team, the Purple Aces, boarded a Douglas DC-3 bound for Nashville, Tennessee. The team were gearing up to play against Middle Tennessee State. As the plane sped down the runway, the players relaxed, focused on the upcoming game, but they would never make it. Moments after takeoff, the plane lost control and crashed into a field. Investigators later found the pilot had forgotten to remove the gust locks on the right aileron and rudder. A shift in the overloaded baggage threw off the plane's balance, causing it to plunge to the earth. 25 people on board were killed instantly, and 3 more died shortly after. The head coach and the entire team perished, all except for one, freshman David Furr, who'd stayed behind due to an ankle injury. Furr had narrowly escaped a horrific death, but fate had one final cruel twist. Just 2 weeks after the crash, Furr and his brother were killed in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. Out of respect for those lost, the rest of the Purple Aces season was canceled. Number 3. Jessica Gawi. Our next entry is Jessica Gawi, although she was better known professionally as Jessica Redfield, an up-and-coming sportscaster in Denver, Colorado. In June of 2012, Redfield would narrowly escape with her life while in a mall in Toronto, Canada known as the Eaton Centre. She'd been over in the food court, but after ordering something to eat, she decided to take her food outside rather than sitting and eating among the other patrons. Unbeknownst to Redfield, that decision had saved her life. Moments after she left, a man named Christopher Husbands entered the food court and proceeded to open fire on the area where Jessica had been only minutes prior. During the Eaton Centre food court shooting, Husbands killed 2 people, and 5 other shoppers were shot and injured. Jessica Redfield had miraculously made her departure at exactly the right time. She would later state that she had gotten an uneasy feeling moments before the shooting took place, one that had prompted her to leave the mall. However, whatever had forewarned her would fail to do so again, when a month later Redfield was present at yet another active shooting. On the 20th of July 2012, moviegoers settled down to watch The Dark Knight Rises at Century 16 Movie Theater in Aurora, Colorado. Suddenly, 24-year-old James Egan Holmes burst in and threw tear gas grenades into the audience, then used multiple firearms to shoot at moviegoers. He injured a total of 70 people, 58 of them from gunfire, and took the lives of 12 people. Jessica Redfield was among them. that's not the only Jessica that experienced a reversal of fortune. Number 2. Jessica de Lima Roll. In 2013, Jessica de Lima Roll was partly responsible for organizing a party between 6 student faculties at the Federal University of Santa Maria. The event, called the Aglomerados, was hosted at the Kiss nightclub in Santa Maria, Brazil. Tragically though, during the event, the acoustic foam in the ceiling would end up igniting after fireworks intended for use outdoors were lit inside. The result was a catastrophic fire, and people hurriedly rushed to leave. There was one problem though: the building itself had only one exit. As the fire spread, those in attendance were piling up trying to escape. Around 630 people were injured, and 242 lost their lives. However, Jessica de Lima Roll was one that managed to escape the blaze. In fact, she hadn't even been at the party to begin with. Even though she had been one of those involved with organizing it, Roll was asked by her boyfriend to stay home. Roll thought of her boyfriend Stefanel as her guardian angel, and he felt like he'd saved her life. But it seemed that no amount of angelic intervention could have prevented the freak accident that would claim both their lives just days later. After driving to visit Stefanel at work, Roll and her partner were driving home only for their car to collide head-on with a truck. The crash killed Roll instantly, and Stefanel would later pass away at the hospital. A day before, he would have turned just 21 years old. Number 1. Bobby Leech. Arguably one of the most famous cases of a lucky escape followed by an actual death was that of Bobby Leech. Taking place nearly 100 years ago in 1926, Leech was a daredevil stuntman who almost lost his life after going over Niagara Falls in a steel barrel. The same stunt had been tried and failed by a number of daredevils. The key was to create something that would keep the stunt person alive. For Leech, that was a steel barrel that he had built himself. While it protected him as it fell down the falls, it left the stuntman so badly injured, it took 6 months for him to fully recover. But the stunt bought Bobby Leech his fame, and he would tour the world talking about his death-defying stunt. That is, until one day in 1926, when after giving a lecture in New Zealand, the stuntman slipped on an orange peel. That'd be a hell of a way to go, but the reality was far less humorous. While the fall didn't kill Leech instantly, it did lead to injuries that became infected, resulting in the amputation of his leg. Following the surgery, Leech's health worsened, and on the 26th of April 1926, he eventually died. Can you imagine surviving one close call with death, only to face another soon after? Tell us in the comments what you would do if you were given a second chance. Now go check out lucky ways people survived certain death, or click this video instead.